Hey guys, my guest tonight, John Olsen, is going to be talking about ghosts and other legends from around the world. I'll be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks, find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust, turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing? Monday, start the week. Here we go again. Another week ahead of us. Going to rain this week. Winter's coming. Anyway, my name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We're 45 strong up and down the state. And what that means is that if you think you might have a paranormal need, whether it's a house or business, we can help you out. It might take us a couple days to get to you because California is a huge state, but we can get to you. In the event that it takes a couple days to get to you, we do have mediums on staff who can phone you and talk to you about what may or may not be going on. And in a lot of the cases, if there is something going on, then they could settle down the energy until we get out there. But like I said, it won't take more than a couple of days for us to talk, to get to you, especially after the initial email. Now, you can find California Haunts on Facebook under California Haunts. Let me raise this a little bit. There we go. Under California Haunts, you can find us under California Haunts Radio. You can find us under Sacramento Seers, and that's Seers, as in Greek Seers. Okay. You can also find us over at TikTok under California Haunts. You can find us on Twitter under California Haunts, on Twitch under Cal Haunts, and over at Instagram under Ghosty Gal, and that's all lowercase. All right. That being said, before we start, we've got a great show lined up for you today. Before we start out, if you're watching from Facebook and you like what you see and hear, please feel free to hit that follow button if you haven't done so already. And throw me some love, throw me some likes, throw me some happy faces, things like that. And be sure to comment in the chat room, because what that does is it puts us higher in the, it brings us more noticeable to Facebook. And they'll put us higher in what they call the FYP, which gets us out to more people. Okay? And that's the other thing. If you like what you see and there's people in your house or whatever, or you're out with your friends, tell them about us. Come on over, listen to the show, watch the show. Same thing with YouTube. Only over there we've got more than, I'm a journalist, got to watch what I'm saying, more than 780 videos, and they're all this show, all different topics from this show, over at YouTube. And I put them into categories so you guys can check them out at your convenience. And, and like if you want to look at UFOs or Nancy Mass or whatever, they've got their own category. Okay. Same thing on YouTube, though. If you haven't done so already and you like what you hear and see today, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. We're doing shows Sunday through Friday, all different topics, so it's pretty fun, And again, show me some love, give me some thumbs up, some happy faces, and all that, because again, that puts us higher up in the FYP over at YouTube. And YouTube works similar to Facebook, and that they will distribute this out farther. Okay. All right. That being said, my guest tonight has written several books. They're all fascinating. And I think I'm going to let him tell you about himself, because it's a lot easier than me doing it. John Olsen, I've been really eager to have him on, and let's bring him in.
Thanks for having me on. This is great.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Tell me about you, sir.
So my name's John Olsen. I'm the author of the Stranger Bridgerland book series, and I currently have 7 books out. My latest just came out the end of August, so it hasn't been out too long. That one's called Stranger World, and I've been collecting stories and interviewing people since I was 17, so just about 30 years now. And it's just been fascinating to be able to interview people from all over the world, and just a little bit about what got me started in all of this.
Sure.
I grew up in a house that was built in 1883 here in northern Utah, and it was very paranormally active. And so as a kid, growing up, I had all kinds of experiences. In fact, my parents still live there, so I've had experiences basically my whole life
Hmm.
there, dealing with the paranormal and ghosts, everything from heavy footsteps to full body apparitions and things moving and things disappearing, and just really strange, crazy things. And as a kid, my parents didn't want us to talk about it outside of the family because they were afraid people were going to think we were weird.
Of
um,
course.
of course. And so what I did was I just dove in and read and learned everything I possibly could about the paranormal, and I've actually been doing that my whole life. There's so much out there to learn and to understand, and I'm still learning new things all the time. So by the time I was a teenager, I had had friends who had experiences in the house, and I had to admit, yeah, my house is haunted. And then what happened was I started telling my story. My friends wanted me to tell scary stories,
Hmm.
and then before long, people started bringing me their stories, and then not too long after that, I started, hunting down the stories, and it kind of grew from there. And then after my first book, which was called Stranger Bridgerland, and why I called it Stranger Bridgerland is the northern part of Utah, southern part of Idaho, and a little bit into Wyoming was the first um, white man to come in and I guess map all of that was Jim Bridger, very famous mountain man. And so
Hmm.
that area is called Bridgerland, kind of after him. And so I named the first book after him in the series, basically because it started in this area. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
but,
I'm fascinated by by your background because I mean I grew up in a haunted house as well, which is what got me into being a paranormal investigator.
mhm.
In the end, when you were out, looking into these stories, were people apprehensive about talking to you about them?
It at first, yeah, when I had to hunt them down and find out, from first person, because it was important to me that I got all of my stories first person, because there's a
Hmm.
lot of stories out there that, oh, this happened to my uncle's brother's cousin, and
Right.
but I think when I was able to share my story and they understood that I was coming from a place where I had experienced the paranormal,
Hmm.
they felt more comfortable sharing with me. And I think that later on now, now that it's very prevalent on television, and a lot of people, they like to ghost hunt, they like to do, all of this. I think there's a lot less of a stigmatism around it. People are less afraid of being called loony or whatever. Where when I first, started learning about it in the early, I guess when I was really young, and it was the early '80s, there
Hmm.
was this, this thing where people would definitely judge you, and it's not necessarily like that anymore.
You think the TV shows had a lot to do with that?
I think that that has helped. Yeah. And I honestly believe that, a lot of especially certain television shows have both helped and hurt in a lot of, kind of ways. Um, but one way that it has helped is the, people who have had experiences feel a lot more safe about sharing those stories with me
Hmm.
and with other people. And I've always allowed people, if they want to, I'll change their name, or I might tweak where it was, just so, they, if they feel more comfortable that way. But the more I go along, the more people are okay with their name and everything. So
Sure.
it's been pretty fun.
I agree with you. When I first started 18 years ago doing this, I remember it was like walking on eggs to talk to people because back then they thought you were this. But then when the TV shows came out, it started to loosen up a little bit. And then, but like you say, certain TV shows kind of caused a problem. And I remember having to go into the city hall in this town that we were going to investigate this opera house, and I had to tell them, well, we're going to do some filming. It's not like a TV production, just video cameras running around there. I want to let you guys know. And she says, oh, are you going to be jumping out of windows? And I said, well, no. And I said, and I know where you got that from. No, we aren't like them, So, yeah, I agree with you,
Yeah.
100% of that, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. And the biggest thing I think that kind of as a detriment has been trying to explain to people that their security cameras are not always picking up ghosts. It's actually, dirt that's
Hmm.
floating, and trying to convince people of that because of certain television shows can be hard. But yeah, I totally understand what you're talking about. So
I remember those days. You sit there and nobody wants to think they have a dusty house. This is the key.
right.
Nobody wants to admit it. And I remember going, they would be hovering over my shoulders, looking at the monitors, and they'd be like, "Oh my God, you see that?" And I said, "No, it's dust." And they would look at you and go, "No, it's not dust." I
Yeah.
said, "No, it's dust." So what I would do is I would march into their bedroom or whatever we had the camera on, and then I'd stomp around a little bit. And
Oh
then
yeah.
the orb storm would start, right? And then that's what convinced them that, oh yeah, you're right, those are ghosts.
Yeah.
But that's what it's like. I mean, that's even now investigators face that stuff with people because they want it to be haunted so bad
Right.
now,
And
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 it's like,
and and sometimes there's natural explanations for it,
mhm,
and like you say, some people are happy when you can explain that, and some people are disappointed when you explain
yes,
that. So
yes. The other thing is all that fancy equipment when you go
yeah.
up. Because I mean, we have some of that stuff, but I mean, we don't have all that kind of money to blow on that really cool stuff.
Right.
And when we walk in, sometimes people are disappointed
Yeah.
because that's what we're using is like we don't. I mean, like I said, we have a couple of those items that the high end items, but we don't have the rest of
Hmm.
it's all the basic stuff like from the old days. And the people kind of, all right, I thought you'd have this and that and have this. I was like, no, no. Or
Well,
do you
and
run
it's
into, or do you run into people that, like with me as a ghost hunter, I run into people that already know how to ghost hunt, right, from watching it on
mhm.
TV.
Yeah, I do. And I don't have a group, and I don't necessarily go out ghost hunting, but of course this time of year um I'm always in contact with some of the local ones, and my
Right.
wife and I get invited to go out and go do that. And it's really interesting because I'll have people contact me, and they will need help. They'll like need honest help.
Right.
And so I have my a few groups that I feel comfortable getting them in contact with if I'm not able to help them at the time. And
Mm-hmm.
because I explain it like this, and again it goes back to the television stuff where you know if you had a infestation of hornets in your house, and the exterminator just came in and threw rocks at it and then left, that would be a
Mm-hmm.
terrible exterminator. But that's what
Absolutely.
you see on TV, is they just
Right.
go in and stir things up and then leave.
Right.
But yeah, I definitely have groups that I work with and feel very comfortable with. And because of my books and stuff, I have a lot of people that will come to me with problems. And sometimes, like you say, we can explain it off as natural, and sometimes they need real help. And so it's great to have groups, like yours has a great reputation too, that you
Thank
can
you.
actually turn to for help. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me about your books because I'm interested. In studying this stuff, from your perspective, there's ghost legends over here. There's ghost legends in Europe. What is the biggest difference between what how people look at ghosts in Europe as opposed to how they look at them here?
well, in what's interesting that way is the fact that how folklore plays a big part into it.
Uh-huh.
Between here and Europe, there's not as big of a difference.
Uh-huh.
They have different, I don't want to say different types. It's the same
Uh-huh.
kind of hauntings, but like back then, or over in England and stuff, they will have things like uh, Roman soldiers that they see, or stuff like that. Where here in the United States, depending upon where, in the West here,
Uh-huh.
it can be anything from like people from the 1800s to
Uh-huh.
even some Native American
Uh-huh.
ghosts. But as you go all over the world, there are definitely places that are a lot different. Japan, for example, they have
Hmm.
a very dark kind of feel with their ghosts,
Yes.
that seeing a ghost is never a good thing in their culture.
Right.
Um, and in South America is a little bit they're a little bit more accepting of the paranormal, which is kind of nice because they're actually a lot um, more open to share their stories, and not
Hmm.
only with ghosts, but some things that when I first started I never thought I would get stories about, like
Hmm.
the Fae, or and in particular in my last book, I interviewed a woman through her daughter because she didn't speak English, but um, that who had had as a kid a interaction with a duende, which is a small elf type creature,
Wow.
in Mexico. So, you know, all over the world, it's just a little bit different with how they see the paranormal, and yet some of the experiences are the same, which also kind
Mhm.
of blows me away, that people all the way on the other side of the world are having very similar experiences to people here.
I admire you for what you do because you're learning so much, and that's what's important with this field too, is to learn as much as possible about different types of cultures and stuff. And I just totally admire you. Now, I was in England, and I'm not going to say I did recently. I mean, I'm not going to say how old I am because I'm old. Um, but I was there when I was in like 11 or 12, and I remember touring a lot of these haunted castles. A lot of these haunted estates. And back then, I even found it interesting. But like I said, my house is active anyway. But seeing the differences between what was going on in my house and the stories from these castles, and it was quite the education. So that's why I admire you for doing what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to talk to people, and again, like finding out that people are having the same experiences in, say,
Hmm.
England or around the world, that people here in the United States, or and even across the United States is having, whether that's like I said, you know, ghosts, or doppelgangers, or
Right.
all kinds of strange things like that. So.
What do you think is one of the most, well, like you talk about similar experiences, what do you think is one of the most frequent experiences for people that you've run into all over the world?
Ghost stories are probably at the top. That's probably what I get the most of,
Hmm.
is ghost experiences. And then, from there you break it down to whether it's an interactive spirit, or
Hmm.
whether it's just a uh, it's lost me, but the one that plays over and over again, whether somebody's there or not.
Right, right,
Um,
right. Okay.
and so, yeah, I think those are probably the most that I get. Then probably maybe UFOs too, as well, are high on the list.
Hmm.
And then some that are actually seem to be getting more, like a lot more, are what I call glitches in the matrix, or things that happen that they can't explain, that aren't necessarily ghosts or
Hmm.
attributed to something. So those seem to be a little bit more frequent, or it's either more frequent, or people are more apt to tell their story now about it. But
Sure, sure.
yeah.
So, what story stands out to you in this book that you wrote?
Hmm.
I did read it. Great book.
Oh,
I love it. Cover to cover. I
thank
can say
you. I
that.
appreciate that.
Um, when you look back on on these cases or these things in this book, which one stands out to you the most?
Oh, there's so many of them out there that that I love. Um, one that really kind of stood out to me, and kind of got my, I guess, it takes a lot to get me, the goosebumps going. But when I was
Hmm.
interviewing the lady, and it was called Not My Mother. I don't know if you remember that one or not.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, where she lived in the Northeast, grew up there, and as a young girl around Halloween time, um, she got up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and she had to pass her parents' room and kind of go by through the living room, which was um, like the living room and the kitchen were kind of an open concept
Hmm.
there. And as she walked through, she noticed her mother was just sitting on the couch in the dark. And she was a little creeped out by that, but she hurried into the bathroom and then came out and asked her mother if she was okay. And her mother just looked at her just so angrily, just really super mean, which was not like her mother at all.
Mhm.
And then her mother got up and walked to the kitchen and gave her almost a growl, kind of a mean growl look and sound, and then opened the back door and left. So she, was freaked out. She's worried about her mom, what's going on. So she runs to her parents' room and to get her dad. And when she flings the door open, both her mom and dad are still in bed. Her mom's
Wow.
still in bed. And she looks, and she just crumples to the ground crying. She wasn't very old at the time, and tells her parents what's going on. Her dad runs out, and there's can't find anything, but the back door is open. So,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
um, so it was something that really affected her for a long time. And the house, I asked her if they had any other experiences in the house, and she said, "No, my house wasn't haunted, but I had this experience, and I know I wasn't dreaming, even though it sounds like I was, but."
Mhm.
Uh, it was enough to make it so I think she had grown up and moved out of the house before she would get up in the middle of the night to leave her bedroom. So, but that one definitely stood out to me. And when I was interviewing her, talking to her, I could feel, she was transported right back there, and it, was very frightening to her. So,
That's interesting because I was just while you were talking about that, I had an experience here with my mother. I think she had just had her stroke a few days before this. And I used to sleep out on the couch because I dressed because you never knew because my mother was in her 80s, right? So you
oh,
have to get up,
right.
haul your butt out to the hospital. And I woke up and I saw her standing, well, what I thought was her, standing like about 10 feet away from me by our center divider. And I got up and I was looking at her and I said, "Mom, what's going on?" And she turned around and started walking the other way. By the time I got to the hallway door that went to the kitchen, she was gone.
Oh,
So I go
wow.
walking down the hallway and she's sleeping in bed.
Wow.
So to this day, I don't know if it was one of my aunts because I don't. One of my aunts looks similar to her.
Hmm.
I don't know if it was one of my aunts or if it was my mother just had an out of body experience or something.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Both of my parents are currently on hospice,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh.
yeah, and excuse me. When I go visit them now, every once in a while, I'll ask them if anybody's visited, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, my dad came and saw me," or and
Mm-hmm.
but Grandpa's been gone for 25 years, and
Sure.
he goes, "I know, he still comes to see me." So it's kind of interesting when
It is.
people are close to the veil.
Well, it is. In this room where I'm sitting right now was my dad's bedroom until the day he went to the hospital and died at the hospital, but until the day that they took him for the last time at the hospital. And there's a bathroom back there behind all the screens, and there's a mirror there. And he would tell me I'd go in there in the morning to check on him, and he'd say, I had a visitor last night again. And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, when I look in that mirror, I can see a woman passing back and forth in front of the mirror." He says, "I think it's my sister." So
Hmm.
bless my dad's soul. He says, "You know what? Bring your cameras and set them up." And I set up the DVR and gave him a EMF meter, gave him a digital voice recorder and a notebook, and he sat there all night. And I get in the next morning, he goes, "No one showed up last night. We had all
Oh
these looking
no.
around." He was so disappointed.
Yeah.
But yeah, he would talk about it all the time that he had a visitor here all the time.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. That's isn't that it's kind of amazing because not too long ago I just interviewed a woman who it's actually for the next book that I'm working on, but
Mm-hmm.
she talked about when she was a little girl, she was really close to her grandma, and her grandma had gotten really sick, and everybody was helping take care of her. Her grandma lived about a mile away or so, and in the middle of the night, her mom got her and said, "We got to go down and say goodbye to grandma," and I think she was like 9 or 10 at the time. So she kind of
Mhm.
understood, but kind of didn't. So they go down, and she walks into the room, to see grandma. She's
Mhm.
lying in bed, and she recognizes her mom and dad, and I think it was an aunt. But there's a man in the room that she didn't recognize, and he's just standing, near the end of the bed. And so she says goodbye to grandma, and then her mom takes her out and puts her on the couch to fall asleep while everybody else is kind of doing the vigil thing. And
Mhm.
she wakes up, and her grandma's waking her up, and she's like, "Oh, hi, grandma. Are you feeling better?" And her grandma was like, "I'm just here to tell you goodbye. I've got to go." And the man that had been by the bed was with grandma, and she's like, "Oh, who's with you?" And she's like, "Oh, this is grandpa," and introduced them, and then they left, and then she went back to sleep. And she told her mom the next morning, but obviously her grandma had passed,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
she'd never seen a picture of her grandpa, who had passed away many years before she was born, but she picked him out of a picture and said, "Oh yeah, that's who was with
Wow.
grandma." And so it was kind of a sweet, nice story,
Absolutely.
so it's really fascinating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I read about to a case that involved a driver or a car, if I remember right, in the book. Can you tell me about
Oh,
that?
yeah. So that's actually I got contacted by this gentleman who I used to work with. We kept in contact, and he's like, "Man, I've got a story for your book." And I said, "Yeah." And he lived in California at the time, and he was a delivery driver in the morning. So he'd go out really early and deliver to these different places. And I don't have it in front of me, and I can't remember the name of the highways, but he was driving on the highway early in the morning, like 3 o'clock, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden there's some lights behind him from a car, and it kept zooming up on him and then backing off, and zooming up, and he'd try and slow down so they'd pass, and they wouldn't pass. And they were coming up to the intersection where these highways cross, and
Mhm.
he's like, well, he can either pass me there or get off.
Mhm.
And when they got there, the lights just disappeared, and they didn't leave, they didn't pass, they just disappeared. Excuse me, I've got a little tickle in my throat. Um, and later on that day, as he was coming back, he stopped at a gas station to get a little something to eat. He was done for the day, but it was early, and there were some old guys having coffee in the little shop. And he heard the one guy tell the other guy, he's like, "Oh yeah, I saw James Dean the other day. He was chasing me again." And he was like, he had to find out what they were talking about. So he asked what they were talking about, and he told them what had happened. And they said, "Oh yeah, that's James Dean. That's where he was driving his car, and sometimes he will do that. He'll
Oh,
drive up and won't pass you, and then he disappears at that that part in the road, because that's where he crashed. That's where he crashed his car."
oh.
And so he was like, "Holy cow!" He didn't realize it was a paranormal experience, but it was really kind of a cool one.
That is a cool one.
Yeah.
Who'd have figured? Who would have figured?
Yep.
So, which country, after having done your research, which country do you feel has the most ghost stuff going on? Do you think?
Oh boy. You know, I think everywhere around the world does.
Uh huh.
And it's interesting too, because I'll meet somebody, and they'll talk about, we'll talk about books, and they'll be like, "Oh, you got to come to my area because there's all kinds of ghost stories there." But I probably would have to say my favorite, and the one that I would like to go to, would be Northern England and Scotland, with all of the castles and everything there. I think those are really kind of famous ghosts, and kind of,
Right.
the moors and all of that. I
Mhm.
think that would probably be my favorite, and probably one of the more haunted places, I would imagine. So,
Mhm. Yeah,
and
that brought to mind the Lone Piper.
yeah,
Oh my
yep,
gosh, that story's so sad. He's
yeah,
still there. Please
yeah, isn't that
continue.
crazy? Yeah.
Please continue. I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're okay. I was just gonna say, that it's just it's interesting too, because I've actually reached out when I was doing this book, which was all around the world. I was
Mm-hmm.
trying to fill in some gaps that I kind of wanted, and I contacted some castles all over Europe, and um, all I wanted to do was see if they had any staff that would like to share their stories.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny because there's a lot of them that embrace that, and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, you know. And there are some that were like, our castle is not haunted, please don't tell anybody our castle is haunted. And I'm like, I won't. If it's not, I won't, you know, it's fine. But it's just interesting how people react that way. And
Mm-hmm.
um
Mm-hmm.
some people are, I don't know, they either don't believe it or don't want that stigma. I don't know when it comes to, because a lot of the castles in England, especially, that's a big draw if they have
Yes.
ghost stories to it, you
Yes.
know? So,
But I think there are places that don't want the ghost hunters there. You know, that type of people. You know,
right.
coming in. So maybe that's it. Now, one thing, I've done research over there too. Looking into stuff because I've been wanting to get back and maybe do some ghosting over there. A lot of sad stories in those castles. A lot of lost loves and things like that.
Yeah. It for some reason that creates that energy that makes, you know, ghosts. And I think that a lot of those too, because the deaths are surrounded with so much
Hmm.
sadness, I think it makes it really attached to the area, because there's a lot of stories around the world about women in white who, you know, died on their wedding day or near their wedding day, and
Hmm.
they wander because, you know, they had waited so long to get married, and the tragedy that happened. And so that's one, you know, that seems to be around the world a lot. You have
Right.
different stories of ladies in white, or even some with ladies in red, or, you know, and
Hmm.
the sad stories attached to those. It's it's kind of cool that that jumps all over, and it's one of those stories that seems to resonate with people.
Hmm. Absolutely. So when you think about it, when you think about the ghostly activity over there and whatnot, which one of those countries? I mean, Ireland, Scotland, England, obviously. Which one of those countries do you think probably has more activity than the others?
You know, it's probably got to be England. And the reason I think that anyway is one of the other things that I love is history. Like
Hmm.
if I'm doing something and I need something in the background, I will put on a documentary about, you know, this part of history.
Hmm.
And just the other day I was reading about the fact that the number of people that were burned at the stake during the Reformation
Right.
in Europe and stuff. I think
Hmm.
there is a lot of tragic deaths um, that happened in England that you know, you find a lot of stories about that throughout, you know, all of English history. And so I would almost say England probably, and Scotland's probably right up there with it as well. But I'm sure that all through Europe you have the same kind of thing. I know that one of my favorite stories that I didn't personally collect, but I read in, you know, in the northern part of England, there is a big inn that part of the wall that the inn was built on was part of Hadrian's Wall. And there was a story about one of the maintenance guys was in the basement working on the electricity, and all of a sudden, a soldier walks out of one wall and across and through the other wall, and and then all of a sudden, an entire column of Roman
Wow.
soldiers walk through, including horses and everything. And he sees this, and you know, he's in shock and runs up. But the one thing that he noticed was all of them were buried, like they're up to their knees in the dirt as they walk through. But he didn't realize, and he didn't find out till later, that the road was 2 feet down. They put dirt on it. So the
Hmm.
road they were walking on was actually 2 feet under the dirt, which would explain why he could only see from the knees up
Makes sense.
on the dirt as they went through. But because of stories like that, I would love to just go to do a tour of England. My mother is from Denmark, so I have
Mhm.
family in Denmark, and I'd love to go through there as well. Some famous fun castles there too, and haunted manors, and I could
Mhm.
spend a year in Europe going through
Oh
all
yeah,
of those.
absolutely. Oh yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah,
Absolutely, especially now with me because I'm an empath and I didn't really realize how. I mean, because I would see stuff when I was a kid, but you never think, oh, I'm sorry, I have this going on, right? Until you're older. And
yeah,
now that I know what I know, I would just love to go to see what I can pick up on when I am there. Because
yeah,
I just wonder as a kid, because at 12 years old, I remember getting like real heavy feelings as I was going through some of these castles. So that was probably the gift, and I didn't realize what I had.
yeah. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. So for sure.
What about negativity? Let's talk a little bit about negative entities,
Okay.
stories that you've heard.
So I have a few stories of those. One thing that I try to avoid is I try to avoid stories about Ouija boards and stuff like that, just
Sure.
because I don't like to steer people in that direction.
Hmm.
I did do write a couple, and one in particular I did, and I wrote these stories in the books because the people that I interviewed wanted to make sure they were words of warning, which I was perfectly okay with.
Sure.
Excuse me. And so this woman I interviewed, and when she was in her late teens, her boyfriend convinced her to go over to um, I think it was his stepdad's house. Nobody was home, so
Hmm.
it was her and her boyfriend and a friend and his girlfriend that were there. And the boys convinced him to do this with the Ouija board, and started out innocently enough, and then before long they started hearing footsteps. Um, the girls tried to stop and the boys just kept going, and then she started seeing shadows, running from place to place in the house, and eventually one of them was even attacked where they were pushed down and scratched, and it was just a horrible horrible experience with an evil entity that started out telling them one thing. I think that was that they were a child or something, and then
Hmm.
laughing at them later that they believed them. I mean, it was just really a horrible experience. And so, whole thing was, tell your readers, make sure they know. I say, just don't touch that. But um, that was one definitely that was very dark. Um, Not too long ago, actually, this fall, I had a good friend of mine that contacted me, and their daughter was having health problems.
Hmm.
It started as really bad health problems, and then they lived out in the country. They live out in the country, and they said they started seeing this dark entity out in there's an abandoned barn behind their house, and they would see it, and you would just see the outline of it with glowing red eyes, and it seemed to be very interested in this young girl.
Hmm.
And as you may know, when you're going through health problems and stuff like that, the
Yes.
entities can say, attach, or r- think that, oh, there's a weakness and I can exploit this, and I can, there's so much tension because of the sickness that they kind of
Hmm.
feed off that. And so I went out, to talk to him and do some stuff and help him, and they even showed me that one night she was um, in the bedroom, and her dog started growling at the window. And her window is on the second floor, so it's pretty far off the ground. But she could see these red eyes, and there was a big bang, on the window, and she screamed, and parents came in, and then they showed me on the window was three claw marks that had scratched through the screen, just perfect
Wow.
three like that. And so I knew, that was the give all that, it's something really bad.
Hmm.
And so between me and a group that I had come out, do some stuff with the family, help them, uh, they were able to get past that. She's still having some physical difficulties because of her
Hmm.
sickness, but um, it was nice to be able to help her, and through when I help somebody, I explain it like this. If I'm helping somebody and they're a Catholic family, I'm not going to send a rabbi to help them.
Right. Right.
You're going to work through what their belief system is and what, everything like that. So we were able to do that with them and help them and get a lot of um, kind of closure and a lot of relief from that, so they could focus on the
Hmm.
health part. So I'm happy to say after like 3 months, it's not come back. But that was one that was definitely really scary for the
Hmm.
family. And when I was there, I could just feel, you know, something bad out there. But they're really interesting.
I really have a thing against Ouija boards. I mean, it's not a game, and yet the stores sell them as kids' toys. They even sell a version for girls that's pink,
Yeah. Yep.
and
They do.
it's just unbelievable because parents will think they're a toy, buy them for their kid. The next thing you know, there's stuff bouncing around their walls and stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you feel the same way about them, but that's how I feel about them, and
Yeah.
I just wish there was a way to stop the sale of those things.
Yeah. I'm with you 100% on that as well. Yeah. It's one of the things that I've done over my lifetime is also I'm a woodworker and I make things, various different things for people. And I've had several times had people offer me a lot of money to make them a custom Ouija board. And I was like, nope, won't do it. There's not enough money in the world to have me build that for you. So, but yeah,
Yeah,
I feel the same way. So,
cool.
yeah.
So, we have about 15 minutes left. So, are there any stories that you would like to tell us that are in that book that we haven't discussed yet?
Well, I'd love to tell two stories that happened to me. They're actually on a little bit
Okay,
earlier books, but
okay,
they're personal to me, so I
sure.
kind of wouldn't mind sharing. So, when I was in my early 20s, my wife at the time and I had had our first child, and my wife was a hairdresser and she needed to go back to work 2 or 3 days a week. And my mother was like, "Oh, I'll take the baby for a couple, 2 or 3 times a week is just fine." And so she was actually really excited to do that. And the Saturday before she was going to start, I went over to see my mom, and she was excited. She'd gotten down a lot of my baby toys and the old baby toys, and she was showing me. And one of them was this old green baby swing. It's the old ones where you used to crank them up and then you put the
Sure.
baby in a push and it goes swish, swish, swish. And so she's showing me all this, and we went back into the kitchen and we're talking, and um, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I could hear, swish, click. And I looked at my mom, and we walked into the front room, and this baby chair is just going.
Hmm.
And my mom says, did we wind that up? And just as she says that, or I said that, it stopped back all the way, like a hand had grabbed it. And then it lowered down and then gave a shudder like something like the hand had let go of it. And I'm like, nope, that was just the ghost playing with it. And for fun, I wound it up to see if it would go. But
Hmm.
without the weight of a baby in it, it won't swing back and forth. It just kind of stops. You have to have that weight in it. So um, I found that really interested that somehow the ghost was excited, I guess, about having the baby in the house too, or something. But that was really fascinating.
That's
Um,
cool.
and the one of the stories that I had happened to me, I guess. Oh, I'm trying to think. That's probably 10 years ago. My youngest at the time was 7 or 8, and my parents were on vacation. And whenever my parents would go on vacation, the activity would always kind of go up a little bit. They didn't like change whatsoever.
Hmm.
And my parents were gone on vacation, and they just asked me to stop in and feed the cats and check on everything. And so my youngest son, he was like, well, let's have a sleepover and stay up all night and watch movies. And I said, okay, we'll stay at grandma's house. And of course, by 11 o'clock, he's passed out. And so I carried him upstairs to the bed we were going to stay in. And my mom she still has this little Shih Tzu dog, and his name is Bassa. And he usually sleeps with my mom. Um, and so when we stay, he would usually just lay in bed with us too. But so I went down to find him, and Bassa was in his bed in the kitchen. And I was like, Bassa, let's go to bed. And he just kind of looked at me and then closed his eyes. And I thought, well, he'll just sleep down here. And so I shut off all the lights and went upstairs and went to bed. Well, about 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up to just this horrible racket going on downstairs in the kitchen. I could hear, including Bassa barking his head off. So I went downstairs, and as my foot hits the bottom step, it goes quiet, and Bassa barks a couple times, and then it just goes dead quiet. And so I walked in the kitchen and I flipped the light on, and then I immediately knew what the sound was. Every single drawer and cupboard was in a state of being opened. So what I could hear was all of these cupboards slamming and the drawers slamming.
Mm-hmm.
And I found poor Bassa. He is underneath the table, just shaking, just shaking. So I scooped him up and I checked the doors. I knew they were locked, and I knew it was the ghost that had done it. And so I locked all the doors or made sure the doors were locked, and took him upstairs and put him in bed with me and my son. My son slept through the whole thing. But and what's interesting is I tell people that story, and they said, well, what did you do? And I went back to bed. I was tired. And they're like, you're crazy. I would not stay there. But I try and explain, when you grow up in a situation like that, it's kind of cool because you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. But it's not it's not scary because it's happened. Kind of stuff like that has happened my whole life. So, but those were two that really stand out to me in my, being a little bit older, that had happened in the house. So
that is cool. That's very cool. Very cool.
Thank you.
Let's talk about cryptids a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of stories have you come across on those?
So, in northern Utah in particular, well, through a lot of Utah, Bigfoot is actually, a big thing. And I'm really kind of amazed at how many Bigfoot stories I've gathered from Utah all over. And what's really interesting is there's an area not too far from here in northern Utah from me, and it's called Beaver Mountain. It's where they ski. It's a ski resort up here. And all of the stories that I've gathered, well, not all of them, but a lot of the stories that I've gathered, these are people that don't know each other and really haven't told their stories. But, I can draw probably a 5-mile circle, and they're all within that 5-mile circle up in that very area. And one of my favorite ones is this gentleman contacted me, and there's a little bed and breakfast kind of thing up there in the mountains. It's a big log cabin that has several rooms, and it's called Beaver Mountain too as well, Beaver Mountain Lodge. And he was one of the managers, and because it's so far up the canyon, you would stay for 3 days, and then you'd be off for 3 days, on 3 days. And he happened to be on, and he only had one couple that was staying there at the lodge. And so he had checked them in and everything, and he'd gone to bed. And 1 o'clock in the morning, they're frantic banging on his door. And he comes out, and it's the gentleman, and he says, we want to check out. And he's like, you want to check out now? And he's like, yeah. He's like, is everything okay? Is there something wrong with the room? And he's like, there's something outside of the building. And he's like, he finally got it out of the guy that they were on the porch, and this giant hairy creature had run across the parking lot, and they'd seen it, and they wanted to leave. So he checked them out, and they left, threw their stuff in the car, and took off. He kind of shook his head, and he went into the office to put the paperwork away, and the light was off in the office, and he just walked in to put it in there. And behind him was a window that sat up high, And as he put away the paperwork and looked at the wall, he could see this outline of a big silhouette of this head and very
Wow.
little neck. And he kind of backed out of the room and shut the door, and he's standing in the hallway, and all of a sudden there's a huge bang on the building, like something hit the building really hard. So he runs up to his room, and he's sitting there, and he's now all alone up there. And he's like, do I call somebody? If I do, what do I say? And all of us, just then he notices car lights coming down from the main road. So he goes down, and it's highway patrolman. And the highway patrolman asked him if they'd had any complaints. And he said, well, yeah, I had people leave. He's like, what do you mean complaints? And he said, well, we got complaints from somebody in a gorilla suit's been running around
Boy.
across the road. And he goes, that doesn't make any sense. This is the middle of the week, and there's hardly any traffic. Nobody would be playing a prank up here in the middle of the mountains. And he asked the highway patrolman, he goes, is there a lot of weird things that go on up here? And the highway patrolman was quiet for a minute, and he's like, we're not really allowed to talk about all of the strange things that go on up here. So that's one of my favorite ones from that area for sure.
What do you think, like when you talk about that particular area, what do you think is one of the most poignant stories, like you've heard out of, say, Oregon or Washington State, if there is anything?
I don't have any Bigfoot stories from up there.
Okay, that's cool.
No yeah, it was really interesting. All the ones the Bigfoot stories I have are from Utah and Idaho and Wyoming.
Okay.
But I do have stories from up there where, in particular, this guy and his wife lived in the rural part of Washington, but they went to Seattle for their anniversary. And in the middle of the night, he wanted to go get a drink for them. So he was walking down the road and, on the sidewalk, but it was a really nice part of town. So he felt safe going at night. And all of a sudden, this gentleman steps out in front of him, and he's wearing dark clothes, and he's very pale, and there's just something about his eyes that are really weird, and they lock eyes. And this guy asks him, do you have any extra money? And the guy said he was in a trance. Like, he wasn't afraid, but he was in a weird trance. He's like, I would have given this guy anything he asked for. And he says, I know that sounds weird. He says, not out of fear, but out of this weird, calm, strange, almost like I was being hypnotized. And so he's like, I just handed him my wallet. And the guy laughed, and he just pulled out a 20 out of everything in there. He goes, this is all I need. And he gave his wallet back to him. And before he left, he's like, is there anything I can do for you? And the guy's like, no, I'm good. And it was just, but he wandered back in this weird trance, and it was almost like a vampire. If you've heard of vampires that can do that to people or something. And I'm not saying that's what it was, but it was something very strange like that. So
why do you think people are so fascinated by stories of the paranormal?
I think it's this innate feeling inside of us that we love the unknown. It's the same reason our ancestors went over the next hill. They wanted to see what was over the next hill, just needing to know. And because it's something that can't always be explained by science, I think it's just one of those things that's we just feel like we need to know. We need to understand the world that's around us. And sometimes the world around us just doesn't make any sense at all. So it keeps us going. I really think that's what it is.
Being a writer and talking to people about these stories, and maybe going on site to see where they took place or whatever. Excuse me. Do you find that things follow you home at all?
I think that there have been things that have followed me home, but I think they were all things from my parents' house, to be honest. Because every once in a while I'll have experience in my house where I'll hear something, or I'll know it's something from my parents' house because I'll hear my wife come home and then
Mhm.
it's she's not home. That
Mhm.
one happens a lot. And so, and then I know, okay, something's come home from grandma and grandpa's house, but it'll leave in the next couple days or something. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
but nothing nefarious I can say has followed me yet. Cross my
I think
fingers. So,
if it's like here, I know the ghosts how they act,
mhm,
so I can tell right away if something follows me home that doesn't belong here because they don't act right.
right,
And
right,
so my poor neighbors are used to me opening the windows and doors and kicking things out of here. They laugh,
yeah,
you know, that I'm doing that. So yeah, I mean, especially the work I do, the work you do, you got to be extra careful though when you're out of these locations.
yeah, exactly. And I actually have, because of what I've done, I've had many people who end up with objects that they don't want, and I
Mm-hmm.
end up taking them. But I have a special way that I keep them safe and away so they don't bother me. But I've got quite a collection now. And what's funny is I remarried my wife, and I married about 8 years ago, and it wasn't until like maybe a year. She knows what I do. She helps me. She's always cool with that. But it wasn't until maybe a year or so ago that she found out that I had those, and she was a little. She's like, "What do you mean you have those?" So, but which was an interesting conversation. But everything stays when I keep it where it's supposed to be. It minds its business, I guess I should say. So.
Absolutely. Now you have a podcast, correct?
Yeah, my wife and I do a podcast. It's strangerbridgerland.com, Stranger Bridgerland podcast. And we usually put one out once a week where we just talk about the paranormal and some things that are going on, and where we'll be talking, and some of the things we've got going on. So, um, yeah, I'd love to have people check that out if they like the paranormal. So.
Absolutely. Where can people find you?
So you can find me on strangerbridgerland.com, and you can contact me through there. There's a section there so you can email me or let me know if you have a story or just want to reach out and say, you know, anything. And all of my books are on Amazon under Stranger Bridgerland book series. And there's, like I said, there's 7 of them now, and you should be able to find them on there. They're on Kindle and softback. I do have a few on Audible. I'm hoping to get the rest of them um, eventually on Audible, because I know a lot of people like to listen um,
Mm-hmm.
more than read sometimes. So hopefully they'll be on there. But those are the best places to catch me.
Okay. Last question. If you were on the main drag at Las Vegas and you had a little bookstore with your books, and there were other authors out there lined up on the street that have similar books as what you have, how do you
Uh-huh.
get people in to buy your books?
Oh boy. I think that the fact that my books are first person, or my stories are first person,
Mm-hmm.
that they come from the person that it actually happened to, and that my book has 40 stories in it. It's not just one big story. There's 40 stories in it. And one thing I like to do as a writer is kind of get to the meat and potatoes. I like to give some backstory, but I like to get to the spooky parts. And so I hope that's probably how I would do it, to let them know about that. And they're perfect for late nights or campfires. Like if you like to tell stories around the campfire,
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's perfect for that. So
John, I want to thank you for coming on. I so appreciate it. I enjoyed it. The hour went by really fast.
yeah.
I just had a blast.
Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, I love the podcast. I love all of it. You do a great job. So thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you so much. Hope to get you back on with your next book.
You bet. Anytime, let me know.
All right, sounds good. You have a great rest of your evening, and thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye. All right, yeah, that was great. I love hearing stories like that from around the world. I'm just so fascinated by that stuff. Even after doing this for 18 years, ghost stories are always good for me to hear. Okay, tomorrow we're doing a little bit different. 6:30 p.m. Pacific, we'll be back here. Nancy Matz is going to come in tomorrow. She still can't see, so she's going to be doing readings primarily. So get your question ready. Figure out what you want to ask her because she's going to be on doing readings tomorrow. So that's the big thing on that. So she volunteered to do them. I'm excited. It's kind of fun. We haven't done that in a while. So be prepared for that, you guys. That'll be at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. As you've noticed, I no longer have the 5-minute intro. So for the people that are used to having a 5-minute lead into this show, it's gone. It's gone. It's 55 seconds now. So you have to be here at 6:30 to get the intro, and the show starts right behind it. So I'll just let you guys know that. So you're going to start seeing some changes to the show in that I'm not going to any longer be doing a bunch of blah at the front, as far as the events that are coming up. Probably Thursday or Friday, starting midway through the show, there's going to be like pop-ups in the middle of the, at the half-hour mark. That will talk about those extra things that we have going as a team. So that's going to be happening too. So I'm just trying to do some tweaking, on the show so that we can get a little more attention over YouTube, get some more love from them. So hopefully it starts to work out and stuff. I've just been working different ideas, and poor Nancy's been the one I've been throwing these ideas out at, and whoever's around to listen. I feel sorry for you guys. But yeah, so I'm going to start doing that, and so you're going to see some differences in the show. So let me know what you think. If you guys saw the intro tonight, let me know what you think of the intro. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you think I should change stuff in it? Let me know, because I'm looking to tweak it and make it a thing that everybody can like. Okay, all right. So again, I will see you tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific with Medium Nancy Matz. And in the meantime, if you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. Again, we're equal opportunity here. We're just trying to build this up, and I'm hoping by Christmas to have a whole 1,000 subscribers over YouTube. We're getting closer and closer and closer every day with that. So I'm real excited about it. And if you liked it, and you're on Facebook, please be sure to hit that follow button. If you like the show overall, show me some love. Give me a happy face. Give me a thumbs up. Show me hearts. That would be great. I'd appreciate it. All right. Without further ado, I'm getting off of here, and I will show you his information, and we can get on with our evening. How's it sound? Here we go. Website is StrangerBridgerland.com. I can't even say that word. And, of course, he has his podcast. Links to the podcast are at his website. And we got the book Stranger World. We've got Stranger West. We've got Shadow Rescue. Probably said it wrong. I'm sorry if I said it wrong, you guys. And then Stranger US. If I said that one wrong, I apologize. And we've got Stranger Bridgerland, and we've got Beyond Stranger Bridgerland. And you've got Beyond Stranger US and Stranger Paranormal. And you can either get those links on his website or Amazon. Okay, now that I botched that, hey, it's hot here. This spotlight today is putting off a lot of heat for me. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on the day, but this thing is really blasting the liver stuff out of me. Okay, I'll see you guys tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Have a great rest of your evening.